Alright guys and girls, this is Jerningham here. Let's see what this video gives us a good idea for the UK. I don't know about Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, have got their own rules. But this gives us a rough idea of what tiers are in the UK, what you can do, what restrictions you could have on you, and what you can do in other places. Some restrictions are tighter than others in different areas. Let's play the video. Pardon me. Let's see here now.
Tuesday, the figure was quite a lot higher.
After this lady stops speaking, then we're going to the other tier things.
The fact that there is also the lag of the weekend, but also
It's about lag of the weekend and Christmas.
period. But what is quite interesting when we look at the week-on-week data, actually what it's showing is a drop of 4% in the number of people who've died. It's not clear at the moment whether that's because of this Christmas effect or whether that is actually something which is panning out in the hospitals. Whatever's happening, though, it's of huge concern, which is why within minutes of receiving today's data, there was a statement from Public Health England, from Dr. Susan Hopkins, who is the senior medical advisor there. She said, "We're continuing to see unprecedented levels of COVID-19 infection across the UK, which is of extreme concern, particularly as our hospitals are at their most vulnerable." Whilst the number of cases reported today includes some from over the festive period, these figures are largely a reflection of a real increase. And actually, we've been seeing England's figures throughout, and they have increased dramatically. So it will be interesting to see what pans out when we hear about the new tiers.
Emma, thanks very much indeed. Well, Boris Johnson has been chairing a meeting of senior ministers this evening to consider those new coronavirus restrictions. The so-called COVID-O meeting is examining the latest data on infection rates ahead of that review of England's tier system tomorrow. So let's remind you currently of how things stand with these tiers in England. Under Tier 1, the lowest level of restrictions. The rule of 6 applies indoors and outside. There's an 11 p.m. curfew for pubs and restaurants, and weddings can have up to 15 guests. In Tier 2, different households cannot mix indoors, but the rule of 6 applies outside. Pubs and bars can only stay open if they serve a substantial meal with alcoholic drinks. In Tier 3, pubs and restaurants must close except for takeaway and deliveries, but non-essential shops can stay open. People must avoid travelling outside of their local area. While in Tier 4, restrictions are similar to the national lockdown in November. All non-essential shops must close, households cannot mix indoors, and people should stay at home as much as possible. Let's join our political correspondent Tom Rayner at Westminster. So we knew this tier system was up for review on the 30th. Boris Johnson had told us that. That's being discussed at this meeting. Also, what happens to England's schools?
That's right. This meeting, being chaired by Boris Johnson, will see the recommendations of the Joint Biosecurity Centre put before the Prime Minister about what changes should take place with regards to the tier system. And they'll be looking at individual areas, looking at the case rates, yes, but also looking at where cases are concentrated in terms of age groups, where people appear to be picking up infections, also things like hospital capacity, and those judgments will be being made as to whether or not areas should be going into higher tiers. I think the chances of any areas in England being moved into lower tiers at this point look pretty remote, given the case numbers that were being set out by Emma just a moment ago. Now, that will clearly concern MPs who are awaiting the update that is expected from the Health Secretary, setting out what's decided tomorrow. As your graphic just showed, the implications for the economy, particularly in Tier 4, are significant. But I think there's another debate going on as well, and you mentioned schools, because there are indications in some of these case numbers that perhaps Tier 4 is not proving sufficient in terms of reducing the spread, given
Tier 5
variant of COVID-19. Certainly some of the scientific advisors who are part of the government's advisory group have been giving interviews over the course of the day, in which they suggest that the possible delay of the new school term or wider school closures might need to be considered if tier 4 measures as they stand are not strong enough. Currently, the government says that their plan to have a staggered return for secondary schools remains in place. That would mean that year 11 and 13 students would go back on site.
They're talking about high schools need testing with the army. Basically, the army are going to be testing all the people in the schools. Does that mean across the whole of the UK, across Northern Ireland and Scotland? They'll be checking all the schools.
Sticking to that plan for now, the Prime Minister's official spokesman saying that that was still the intention, but with a heavy caveat that these measures and these plans are kept under constant review. And I think that will unnerve parents and head teachers thinking about what next week might hold.
Westminster, thank you. Now, the pandemic is certain to dominate tomorrow's papers once again, and we'll be taking a first look at the front pages in our press preview tonight at 10:30 with City AM's comment editor Rachel Cunliffe and the Financial Times Whitehall correspondent Sebastian Payne. Do join us then from 10:30. So let's bring you more on the debate over the reopening of schools in the new year. Scientists, school leaders, and now some Conservative MPs are suggesting a delay might be needed to their reopening. Head teachers are desperately seeking clarity and trying to plan for all eventualities. Sky's Becky Johnson reports.
It's just a few days until the start of term, and teachers still don't know which pupils they'll be opening for and when. Amid growing speculation that a decision change around schools is coming, head teachers like Michelle Sheehy can only wait to be told what's happening.
It's really concerning for us because we want to give parents a little bit of notice. We don't know what the right answer is. I mean, I'd love to have the children back. We want the children in school, definitely. But obviously, if they can't come back because it's too risky, well, then they can't come back. But if that is the case, we need to be able to give the parents enough warning so that they can make arrangements. I feel as though, we keep changing what our advice to parents is.
Hold on a second, just need to do this video.
Scientists warning that reopening schools will lead to more rapid spread of the virus. The government is planning mass testing in secondary schools, saying the military will help with testing.
So they're talking about the military going into schools now.
But the executive head of this school in Oxfordshire says preparing for mass testing isn't proving easy. And it
I heard people talking in the party chat. I'm trying to do this video, so I heard people talking in it. So I had to pause the video and then try and do the video again.
We have to gain consent because of data protection laws for children to be tested. We've been given an indication of the numbers of volunteers. So at Didcot Girls' School, for example, one of the schools in our trust, we estimate we would need 18 volunteers a day to carry out testing. And there's no indication yet about where they would come from.
At the moment, the government is saying primary pupils will go back to school next week, while secondary pupils will have a staggered start to the term. But they have said the plans are under constant review, which leaves millions of pupils, parents and teachers unsure of what will happen in just a few days' time. If schools don't reopen, there are fears for vulnerable children and also concern about the impact on summer exams. Tory MPs are split on the issue, with some urging caution.
In the light of what we may be facing within the next 2 or 3 weeks, as I fear the Christmas chickens come home to roost with the pandemic, and if there's a further spread, I would urge the Secretary of State to press for a delay while the situation is reassessed at the very least. And ideally, I'd like to see teachers vaccinated before they go back to school.
Parents out enjoying the snow in Walsall were divided on what should happen next week.
The schools have got very good sort of policies in place, and I think it's important that they should go back.
I think it should start next week. because mainly the children, it is being spread by the children nowadays, because I'm a nurse and I have seen so many young people are coming to the hospital.
Keeping schools open has been a key priority for the Prime Minister, but with the virus spreading so rapidly this winter, is it a risk he's prepared to take? Becky Johnson, Sky News.
At least 6 people have died, including a young girl, after a strong earthquake hit central Croatia. The 6.4 magnitude quake struck hardest in the town of Petrinja, 28 miles southeast of the capital, Zagreb. It was the second earthquake in as many days and was felt in neighbouring countries, including Slovenia, Bosnia, and Serbia. Our Europe correspondent Adam Parsons reports.
The Croatian town of Petrinja was hit by a small earthquake yesterday, but as this reporter reflected on that incident, something much bigger happened. The town shaken and smashed by a much larger quake. The mayor had been giving a brief press conference at the time. And in neighbouring Slovenia, the parliament building trembled. A nuclear power plant located on the border between the two countries was temporarily shut down. In Petrinja, the damage was obvious. The mayor said half his town had been destroyed.
This is a disaster. This is a disaster one cannot imagine. I don't know if people in houses are alive or dead. Half of the city has been demolished. Our kindergarten has been demolished. Our court is demolished too. This is a torment. I call for help from anyone who can come.
The number of casualties remains unclear, but among the dead, a 12-year-old girl. For those in the area, it was a terrifying experience.
Earthquake again. It's a catastrophe. My flat is completely ruined. The building is okay, but the flat is completely ruined. It's a catastrophe.
The trees were falling, everything was collapsing, people were falling. We heard screams in the house near the square here. We heard the screams, a girl was under the wall, and we went there to get her out. And from another house we pulled 3 people.
Terrible. It was terrible. A shock. You don't know what else to do or where to go, outside or under the door. We're on the first floor. Look how beautiful this building is, and inside all the walls are ruined, cracked, wardrobes open with clothes everywhere. This is worse than war.
This earthquake was even bigger than the one that hit the area earlier this year. The Prime Minister, who rushed to the town, offered support and sympathy. But still, this is a chaotic scene. People being pulled from rubble, buildings creaking, and the constant fear of another shock. Adam Parsons, Sky News.
The first episode of The Duke and Duchess of Sussex's new podcast has been released on Spotify. The half-hour episode features celebrities including Sir Elton John and James Corden reflecting on the past year. But the couple's son Archie steals the show, speaking publicly for the first time with a slight American accent. Lisa Holland can tell us more.
We're glad you're here. As we all know, it's been a year, and we really want to honour the compassion and kindness that has helped so many people get through it.
They are the royals who left the British monarchy, but Harry and Meghan still want their voices heard.
I want to thank healthcare workers, frontline service workers, and so many others for their sacrifices.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
It's nearly a year since the couple sought a new life away from the glare of the UK media. But in a deal with Spotify, they've released a Christmas podcast reflecting on the challenges of 2020 in a series of interviews with high-profile friends, including Sir Elton John.
I'm 73 years old and I'm a semi-diabetic, so I'm in a risky area there. I have an underlying condition, as they say. I've seen my immediate family, Zachary, Elijah and David, all the time. But my relatives, who I love, haven't been able to see much of them at all.
There's a brief appearance from the couple's son Archie with his own holiday message.
Happy
New?
New?
New
The episode ends with the gospel song This Little Light of Mine, which accompanied the couple as they walked out of St George's Chapel in Windsor on their wedding day in May 2018. The world and their role in it has turned upside down since then, but Harry and Meghan clearly still believe they can be a positive influence outside of their former role as members of the royal family.
From us, I will say, no matter what life throws at you guys, trust us when we say, love wins.
Love always wins.
So true.
Lisa Holland, Sky News.
Stay with us on Sky News. We'll have the sport next with Ed and the latest from tonight's Premier League games as Crystal Palace's Sheffield United look to overcome
Anyway, hope you all enjoyed that video. Give it a like, give it a comment, share it with your friends. See you in the next one. Peace.